Hello there. Welcome to Just the Dis. Talk about Blu-rays here. And today I am returning to a label that I've talked about on the channel before, and that is Gold Ninja Video, run by Mr. Justin Decloux of a wonderful podcast called The Important Cinema Club and others. And he's been doing some really interesting stuff. I highly recommend going back and checking out my original video where I go through some of the recent releases from Gold Ninja. But one of their most recent is this movie here, Skip Tracer, from 1977. This is a really big get for Justin at Gold Ninja. This is a Canadian film that has quite a reputation as being one of the best produced during the tax shelter era and in general. And I totally get it now. This is a movie that had been recommended to me via Paul Korup, who has written about it on his Canucksploitation.com site, which I highly recommend for all things Canadian cinema. My good friend Elric Kane saw it and liked it, and so I've just heard it recommended for years, but one of the problems was availability. It was just very tricky to see this movie, because it's only ever been released previous to this, on VHS under another title, which I'll get to in a second, actually. And so I never got around to checking it out. But this new Blu-ray is the best presentation you're likely to ever see of this film. It is from I'm trying to find how he exactly words it on the site. Never before available on Blu-ray or DVD, Gold Ninja is proud to present this remarkable thriller in a new 2K scan from a theatrical print provided by the Library and Archives of Canada. So he mentions in one of the features that, as far as I know, the negative is gone. So this is likely to be the best presentation you'll see of this film. It is a scanned film print. So not, the best materials we could think of, but in regards to a rare film like this, it looks pretty good. Know that it is originally shot on 16 millimeter and blown up to 35, and so that sort of film will always carry a certain texture to it. There's always a certain look. The graininess of it is always going to be a little higher because of the 16 millimeter original source. So know that when you watch the movie. But as far as I can tell, this is the best it's ever looked. And so hats off to Justin for getting this out there. But yeah, it is a fascinating character study. I've heard it compared to, Paul Schrader. The easy way to encapsulate it would be to say, Glengarry Glen Ross meets Repo Man. But when I mention Repo Man, which I think is a very funny movie, this film does not have that kind of humor at all. It's pretty straight. It is about a skip tracer, a loan officer, a debt collector, if you will, named John Collins, who's played really well by this actor David Peterson. He's sort of like the best in the biz. And this movie sort of follows him through the place that he's at with the company he works for. He is their man of the year, I think 3 years running. He's coming up on, this is the fourth year if he makes it. And so it's kind of like, the sales prizes in Glengarry Glen Ross. But there's an air of desperation. There's an air of more of a sort of a sadness to this film because of what he's having to do and how he's having to sort of steel himself against the sob stories that he gets. He's just kind of sadistic in some ways about it. He really embraces it, but we do see human moments with him where he actually maybe has not regret exactly, but sort of about some of the things he's done, but he just has to keep trudging forward with this. And he meets a younger Repo Man, if you will, that is sort of trying to learn the business. Like, he can't make his quotas. He's like, can I work with you? And he says, okay. He's not really into it, but they start working together, and he sees firsthand some of the stuff that the John Collins character does. And, it's an interesting look inside the mind of somebody doing a pretty despicable job, but taking pride in it and wanting to do it to the best of their ability, even if that means just harassing people from a telephone in a bar that he's in or wherever. Like, he just goes all out to get what he needs. Let's see here. There's a great commentary track included here that Justin does with the director Zale Dalen, and he mentions that Coppola's The Conversation is a big influence on this film, and I can feel that. I can feel that in both the main character and the paranoia that sort of surrounds the main character in that film. There's definitely a lot of that here. But yeah, it opens with this great scene of him pulling up to this guy's house. He gets out a for sale sign and starts tacking it into the lawn, and the guy comes out and he's like, "What is this? Like, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, you owe money on the house and you haven't paid me." And he's like, so he's intimidating people. Like, that's part of the job. That's part of why he is good at what he does, is he's able to do that. And yeah, I just really like the performance. He's very sort of deadpan, and I don't know. I don't want to compare it to like Taxi Driver or something like that, but it's definitely one of those characters you're like, this guy's a tough one. I don't know how I feel about him, So he's going for Man of the Year again this year, and it's going to be a tricky thing for him to pull off because his sales are down. His boss is sort of messing with him, taking his office away from him because his sales are slightly down, and trying to motivate him. And so there's a lot of tension throughout the film, and there's people that don't like him, and there are things that happen because of that I don't want to get into. But it really builds to a nice ending, and it's quite a memorable movie. I definitely enjoyed it. So let's talk about the extra features here. We have, as I mentioned, we have a commentary track with Zale Dalen, moderated by Justin DeClue, and that's a great track. He goes through a lot of the details about things he discovered in the process of coming up with this script. Eventually he talked to some skip tracers, and there's actually some great stories about skip tracers that talked to him after the movie. There's a good story about some guy going up to somebody's house. They owed money on some Encyclopedia Britannicas, and the loan officer knocks on the door, and the guy's like, "Hey, you want your books? Here they are." And he threw all the books from a second-story window onto this guy's head and broke his collarbone. Another great story about a guy who they'd been harassing to get money from, and every time he would go for a job, they would call his employer and get him fired. So eventually this guy came into this loan office and grabbed the manager by the tie and pulled out a big Bowie knife and cut his tie off at the knot. And then I guess the manager after that just took his file and threw it in the trash. So things like that. I think Zale was concerned that he would have been able to make the movie a little funnier if he had injected that into it. But as it stands, I still think it's a really solid film, and I get why people are such fans of it. So then we have an interview with Zale. It's a Zoom interview with Justin and Zale. Similar stuff covered as in the commentary, but also good. We have What the Hell is Canadian Cinema, a video primer, which is very good. It's Justin just talking to camera for about 14 minutes about Canadian cinema. He talks about the National Film Board of Canada being founded by John Grierson. He goes into highlights of other Canadian films, some of which I'd heard of, some of which I hadn't. One that he mentions that I think is really relevant here is called Sudden Fury, which I meant to grab my Blu-ray of and bring over. But if you haven't seen it, it's available from Vinegar Syndrome, a really great, almost Hitchcockian, low-budget thriller. He compares it to Blood Simple, which is actually a really good idea. That's a good comparison. So that's another one that I would put in the category of Skip Tracer as just a really solid Canadian film. So definitely check that out from Vinegar Syndrome. I've talked about that on the channel before. And then what's really neat is they include an entire feature. You can see the poster there. The movie's called Passion. It's another feature from Zale Dalen, and it's, as far as I understand, not really been available. It's shot on video. and it is a full feature, sort of about a guy working in a, I don't know if it's a secondhand shop or a pawn shop or what, but he has a sick wife. It's kind of an odd story. Like, if I describe the story, it may not sound as appealing as the film ultimately is, but it's about this guy, older man, who's sort of lusting after this woman he works with at the shop while he's still married to his wife who's sick, and the woman he's lusting after is kind of annoyed by his harassment. He's not terrible. He's more like ogling her and stuff, but it's just sort of his story. It's like a low-key character dramedy. I think ultimately a sweet film, and so it's really neat. Apparently this is taken from the VHS tape of the director's own private stock, so it's nice to get a bonus feature here, on top of which you get, oh, they don't mention it on the back here, I don't think, but you get the other version of Skip Tracer. I think it was called like Deadly Intent or Deadly something, and it's basically like a VHS transfer of the VHS version, which is open matte, so it's 4:3. And he said, Justin says in the intro, like, he understands a lot of people like to see open matte transfers because they're into VHS and that stuff. He did say that Zale shot for a 1:8.5 frame, knowing that hopefully it would get theatrical distribution. So you get an entire other version of the film on here in that VHS. So if you're into that presentation, you can watch the film that way and see the 4:3 open matte version of the movie, which is kind of a neat thing. So he's really gone out and got a lot of stuff, as he has done before, which I talked about in the other video, for special features for collectors. He also has a booklet with an essay he's written himself. It is called Why Canadian Cinema by Justin Decloux. Why should you care about the cinematic output of a country mainly known as the one above America? Are the films as nice as the population is supposed to be? Is there even something distinct about Canadian cinema, or is it just a pale imitation of the work coming out of the United States? And so this is kind of like something to go along with his, what the hell is Canadian cinema? And there's recommendations in here and stuff. So a nice little, between that and his actual talk on the disc, you really do get an excellent primer to want to watch more Canadian films. But overall, very happy with this disc. Highly recommended if you're into Canadian cinema, but also if you're just into good character dramas, sort of gritty character dramas. Skip Tracer is a big win for us viewers and a big win for Gold Ninja, and I'm happy for Justin for having gotten a hold of this one as a Canadian himself to represent Canada. And he mentions in that little talk that he has other Canadian films that he's going to put out that he says have never seen the light of day. So as far as I know, none of those have been announced just yet. So I'm very curious what those will be. And I just recommend keeping an eye on goldninjavideo.com and his socials for potential announcements of forthcoming releases from Gold Ninja. So thank you to Justin for this, and thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.